to speak to and move the motion on behalf of the Standards, Procedures and Public Appointments Committee convener.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. In opening the debate on my committee's inquiry into sexual harassment and inappropriate conduct, I would like to thank everyone who came in to give oral evidence to the committee and who submitted written evidence. I would like to begin by explaining the backdrop to our work and then outline some of the committee's key findings. A little over 6 months ago, we entered into a new era. Sexual harassment in the workplace was suddenly front and centre of people's consciousness, and this workplace was no exception. Recent months have seen significant changes in attitudes, and it appears that society is now beginning to catch up with a long-standing issue. My committee has responsibility for the conduct of MSPs through our oversight and application of the Code of Conduct for MSPs. Mindful of the Parliament's status as a role model for other workplaces in Scotland, we quickly launched an inquiry which aimed to determine whether current arrangements for dealing with sexual harassment at the Parliament were adequate and, if not, what needed to change. And I would like to thank Daniel Johnson at this point. Having raised the issue with the committee and called for an inquiry, Mr Johnson then resigned his place in the committee in the interest of promoting gender balance. We are not the only ones moving swiftly to address this issue, and our report pays tribute to the rapid response of the Parliament's corporate body in launching its telephone helpline, which provided a route for anyone affected to seek advice and support. This was rapidly followed by a sexual harassment and sexist behaviour survey of all workers at Holyrood and out in regional and constituency offices, which aimed to ascertain the scale of any problem and to gather views and ideas about how people would wish it to be tackled. The corporate body has established a joint working group to consider and agree any actions that need to be taken on a joint or individual basis between the Parliament and the political parties in the light of the survey. In our report, we have asked that the joint working group reviews the evidence provided to this committee in the course of its inquiry, since it included many detailed suggestions about what a good reporting and investigation regime should look like. As part of our inquiry, we looked at the results of the survey, and we were very disappointed to discover worryingly low levels of confidence in the Parliament's policies and reporting procedures. We found it unacceptable that a person affected by this type of misconduct would decide against making a complaint because of a lack of faith in the organisation's process. Would decide against making a complaint because of a lack of faith in the organisation's process. Getting the right complaint regime in place was clearly a matter of MSPs, party staff, Parliament staff, journalists and a range of contractors all sharing the same workplace. This committee's remit only extends to the conduct of MSPs, and our recommendations sit alongside the work of the corporate body, political parties and any other employers with workers in the Parliament. The Parliament's workplace diversity means that there is no one-size-fits-all policy to prevent and address sexual harassment in the Parliament. And this leads me to one of the key findings of the committee's inquiry. We have recommended that a central policy on sexual harassment be created to apply to all campus users, regardless of their employment status. We recommend that this central policy, to be developed by the Joint Working Group, should include as a starting point a zero-tolerance statement and definitions and examples of which behaviours constitute sexual harassment. It's very encouraging to see that the Joint Working Group issued a zero-tolerance statement earlier this week, which sets out what this institution means by zero tolerance and how it will be upheld in practice. The staff survey also revealed chronic underreporting of undesirable behaviours. Indeed, the most common reported response to experiencing sexual harassment or sexist behaviour was to do nothing. While a central policy on sexual harassment ought to give people greater confidence in reporting systems, we discovered that this was not the only barrier preventing people from reporting misconduct. It appears to be the case that many individuals affected by harassment do not report it because of fears on career impact. Disturbingly, this was the reason most cited in the survey for not reporting misconduct. This has to change. It cannot be the case that the victims of harassment feel unable to speak out through fears about job security, promotion prospects, or other more subtle outcomes, such as being ostracised or excluded by colleagues if they make a complaint. This isn't an easy issue to tackle. We recommend that new policies on sexual harassment clearly state that the consequences for anyone reporting misconduct will be minimised, and that safeguarding and protection of the person reporting misconduct is clearly set out in the policies. Staff working for MSPs are in a particularly exposed position. Their own jobs and livelihoods are on the line if the MSP who employs them is removed, or if working relationships break down. The small size of MSP staff teams means that it is virtually impossible to make a complaint on a confidential basis. Our report asks that special consideration be given to finding solutions to protect staff in this vulnerable position. Perpetrators of this sort of behaviour have relied on the silence of their victims for too long. Change is coming. The Parliament's policies and processes must accelerate this change. Many of those we heard from during the inquiry called for mandatory training for all campus users as a way of encouraging culture change. I understand that the idea of mandatory training may raise some eyebrows. Men are generally assumed to be the perpetrators of sexual harassment, but it is important to look more closely at this. The purpose of training on sexual harassment is not only to make potential perpetrators aware of their behaviour. Training is essential for all managers so that they are in a position to support their staff in accessing support and redress. It's also important that we are all aware of where the lines are drawn when it comes to unacceptable behaviour, so that we can call it out or report it when we see it. This is called bystander intervention. Finally, while the incidence of sexual harassment perpetrated by women against men appears to be lower than men against women, the survey revealed that women do harass men. It serves no one to deny or underplay this fact. While our recommendations did stop short of insisting that training for all staff should be mandatory, we do think there is a strong argument for all campus users in training, or including all campus users in training. In the time remaining, I would like to briefly introduce some areas which arose in the course of the committee's inquiry and which require further, more detailed scrutiny because they have far-reaching constitutional implications. And we intend to give these issues more detailed scrutiny in the future, and this debate will help inform our considerations. The first of these ideas is an independent body or figure be established to provide a single reporting, support and advocacy point of contact, with the possibility also of having responsibility for sanctioning MSPs. We recognise that there are practical, legal and constitutional issues which would need to be addressed before such a function could be established, but found the concept worthy of further consideration. We also looked at the possibility of an ultimate sanction for MSPs. In most workplaces, gross misconduct would result in dismissal, but elected members can only be removed from office in a narrow set of circumstances, and we concluded that the process of recall or dismissal for actions amounting to gross misconduct was worthy of exploration, and we are very mindful of the practical and constitutional implications. Finally, we looked at whether a process of suspension could be added to MSPs pending an inquiry into misconduct. We accept that the consequences of a suspension for an elected member could be more serious than for those employed in other capacities. And while we uphold the idea that MSPs should be held to the same standard, we recognise that careful thought would have to be given to such circumstances. The committee looks forward to returning to these thornier issues in more detail once we hear responses to our report, including the views expressed in this debate. I would like to finish by commending the corporate body and the joint working group on their rapid response to the issue of sexual harassment and sexist behaviour. I know that a great deal of work is taking place, and it's very encouraging to see outputs already emerging from their work, with more promised. And with that, I commend the committee's report to the Chamber, and I look forward to hearing the views, and I move the motion in my name on behalf of the committee.
Thank you very much.